unemployment that needs to be attacked, if you like, by government, because they're the only ones that can influence the economy as a whole. Whereas in good times, the higher youth unemployment shouldn't be touched because it's productive to the economic system. If you see what I mean. So the approach to unemployment of young people should be different in recession than from what it is in good times. Now, what should government do? I mentioned just one thing here that the role of government should be, but I'm going to come back and outline more. And this is when governments take the role of the experimentation that young people do in normal times, of the job shopping that you do. Now, what does job shopping do for you? Essentially, it gets you ready for a job that you are productive at. And therefore, what government should do in recession, first and foremost, is to get the young people ready for work. Take the place of the job shopping idea. Teach people what different jobs involve and how they should go about looking for them. And they could do that either directly by giving the instruction directly, or by subsidizing a range of different jobs on condition that the employer takes on a young person and it involves some training or some teaching about the job rather than simply giving them the opportunity to perform the job. And that subsidy could be either a subsidy for new jobs, or it could be a subsidy for jobs that are vacant because the holder of the job is in maternity leave or on sick leave. I was going to say any other kind of sick leave, but of course maternity leave is not sick leave, it's been reminded all the time. Which is something that is practiced with success in Sweden. Now I guess I should say, I said I went to a meeting where countries talked about their experience. One country that is pushing the get young people ready for work idea very strongly is Britain. But Britain is against the idea of using subsidization of employment. For some reason, they think that it's failed in Britain, but I just don't agree with that, though. I don't know why they claim that the Minister for Employment, the British Minister for Employment who was there, said that the main function of government should be getting young people ready for work, but not subsidize employment, whereas Denmark, Sweden, when they spoke, they said the main way that you get young people for work is by subsidizing employment, with which I agree entirely, I should say. Let me now give you some statistics and talk about a comparison between young and adult labor markets, given what I said about the nature of a young labor market. The facts about youths, young workers, is that, as we said, they suffer higher unemployment than adults. Their unemployment of shorter duration because they may or may not like a job and they should quit if they don't like a job. It's more volatile as a result. It goes up and down a lot because once you cut down on hiring, it will affect mainly young people in the first instance. And that university graduates and graduates of higher education institutes suffer less unemployment than early school leavers. And therefore, one way of fighting youth unemployment is to fight the early school leavers, as I said at the beginning. If we look at the European Union, the 27 members, because the data for the 28 is only just beginning to emerge, youth unemployment is about twice as high as overall unemployment. It's about 2.5 times as high as the prime age unemployment. And now, prime age is defined without a limit now. It used to be 15 to 64 years. Now it's over 15 or over 15 for the overall, and over 25 for prime age. There's been a remarkably stable relation between youth and adult unemployment through the Great Recession of 2008. And of course, what that implies is that high unemployment countries, in high unemployment countries, I should say, young people suffer a lot more unemployment. I'm going to use more examples later, but there's an example here. Before the recession, unemployment in Europe was about 7%, and it went up to 10.5. I mean, it's an increase of about 3 percentage points on unemployment. You may not think it's a complete disaster, but because of this constant ratio, youth unemployment used to be 15, twice the adult, and then went up to 23, so the increase was more like 7 points on unemployment, which is beginning to get more serious, and you'll see soon some more serious cases. Now, I think the reason that the ratio is a constant rather than the difference is the fact that in recession, job finding rates are affected uniformly across all the ages, and young people suffer more of it because they start from zero employment. And the implication of that, and what I said, if you look at individual countries, it's a lot worse. Spain and Greece had a very similar experience in this current recession. Overall unemployment went up by 16 percentage points, which of course is a very big number, but then youth unemployment went up by 32 percentage points, which is a disastrous number. You added 1/3 of the population group into the unemployment pool. And in contrast, if you take a country that hasn't suffered very much in recession, like Denmark, where overall unemployment went up by 3.5 percentage points, youth unemployment went up by 7, which is not a complete disaster, as I mentioned, although the Danish Prime Minister was saying that they consider that to be too high and they're taking measures to reduce it. But if you compare it with Greece and Spain, then obviously it's not a very big problem. You see here the unemployment rates in Europe in 2012, just to give you as a guide. The average is about 23% now, unemployment. The highest is Greece, followed by Spain, where they have rates close to 55%. Croatia actually is third, which I didn't know it was there, but it's the predictable countries that are on the right where we have the unemployment. If we leave Croatia out, because I don't really know very much about the economic conditions being new to the Union, you have Greece, Spain, Portugal, Italy, and then Slovakia, which looks next in line for the Troika, in fact, in other ways, and then Ireland, which has been in the Troika. So they're all the Troika affected, infested countries, is the high word. Cyprus, of course, is moving very rapidly in that direction. This was 2012, and Cyprus Troika started in 2013, but it will be there next year. And then on the left, you have again the usual suspects of Germany, Norway, Austria, Netherlands being below 10%. Surprises how countries like Malta and Turkey have such low youth unemployment. I think it might be because participation is very low. They're outside the labor force. The more interesting table that I find is this one here, which gives you the ratio of youth to adult. I said that is a 2. Now the red columns again is the average of the Eurozone and the European Union. And you can see that the ratio in 2012 was exactly the same as in 2007. It's about twice as much youth unemployment as adult. And it stayed constant throughout the recession. In fact, in the vast majority of countries, it stayed constant. And the ones that deviated, I found it a puzzle, in fact, as to why they deviated. There must be some country-specific reason. In Slovakia, for example, youth unemployment went up more than overall, but if you look at Germany, it's been the same. And then on the right, Italy has been the same, 3 times as much youth unemployment as overall. The exceptions I was saying is that Slovakia, the Czech Republic, and Poland seem to have suffered more youth unemployment, and Greece and Cyprus seem to have suffered less youth unemployment compared with the overall. But why that's the case, I don't know. It's not the general rule. The general rule is that ratios are about constant. Okay, well, we did say that youth unemployment has to be higher than adult for good economic reasons, which is learning about skills, but at the same time, it cannot be a at the same time in recession that function is not being performed, and therefore you need policy. And also no country, big country differences can be justified on those grounds, on the grounds of economic optimality. There is nothing that tells you that that in Greece it takes a lot longer for young people to find out about jobs than in Germany, for example. There must be something else in operation which must be related to policy. This slide, in fact, is, I've already said that actually, I meant to remove that, but I don't know why it's still there. So I'll now talk about consequences for unemployment and design policy, and then give you the chance to ask questions. First, just the one slide that I promised on the effects of youth unemployment. Now, the main type of unemployment that is harmful is the long duration unemployment. So now, what do we define by long duration? Usually statisticians call long duration unemployment any unemployment that is for over a year. But for a young person, a year is too long a time. I thought 6 months, especially in recession, would be a much better duration to have as a guide. But in fact, the European Union is going further, and they're saying 4 months. Beyond 4 months is what you might call long-term unemployment, and therefore action needs to be taken when unemployment reaches, when an unemployed person reaches 4 months without a job. I think it's a little bit too optimistic. It's good if they can bring it about. I myself doubt it because they don't have the money, but anyway, that's the definition now. Unemployment, especially long-term, carries implications for wages and employment into later life. There are studies that show that 10 years after the person experiences unemployment, earnings and unemployment experience are still worse than someone who hasn't experienced it. It's what's known as the scarring effect of unemployment. But I think more seriously is the new type of research, which is sometimes called as happiness research, which examines the response of people to unemployment. And long duration unemployment has a devastating impact on the person. There are 3 events in a person's life that bring extreme unhappiness and withdrawal from social life, and these are definitely family, divorce, and unemployment. And then anything else comes way down, and I'm sure divorce will leave that group sooner or later because it's becoming so common. And so you're left with death in family and unemployment. And the young person from that also feels rejected by society, skills atrophy, withdraws, feels disenfranchised, and then it's much more difficult to get back to work. It really attacks the social fabric of society, and it loses a whole generation. So it's very urgent that action be taken. As I mentioned before, it's good that European leaders are now realizing it and taking action and trying to contain unemployment. Now, the best type of policies is one that contains unemployment for young workers, but at the same time, it enables them to learn about the labor market, because that's essential for productivity purposes, for the future of labor productivity. So the get them back to work idea of learning is an essential component, and it has been successful, in fact, in all countries that have tried it, and it's also very cheap, by the way. So given the cost advantages of that, and given the benefits from it, it's something that should be practiced in all countries. All it requires is some good organization of the public employment services to provide that service. And there is no excuse really when that kind of instruction is not given. Now something that sometimes draws rather negative comment, because what I'm now going to say is what type of a labor market, and if we have different types of organization in the labor market, not the youth labor market, but the overall, the big structure. What kind of organization is best for young people? If you're a young person, what type of labor market would you want to enter? And the answer is that you should want to enter a labor market which gives you the biggest choice of jobs. That there's a range of jobs that you can apply for. and one that is flexible in the sense that there is a lot of turnover of labor in those jobs. And therefore, you wouldn't hesitate about locking yourself into a job because if you do that, then you might miss the chance to find another job. It's the idea that if there is a job that you think might be good for you, you go into that job, and if you live in a high labor turnover economy, then you say, well, I don't care if there is some other job that looks good now, because if I don't like this job in 3 months' time, another job of this type will come up. You see, that's the idea. It's the idea that the labor market generates jobs all the time, because the adult workers come and go as well and give the chance to the young people to apply for those jobs. In that way, you learn more, you find what you want to do, and you're happier, and you're also more productive, which is the advantageous social outcome. And therefore, if you're a young person, you should say, well, I like a labor market that is flexible, generates a lot of jobs, I like one that gives me choice on what I apply. Now, how can you achieve that? Well, I've listed here some policies that work against that idea, and therefore you shouldn't support them if you're a young person coming out of a job. And one of them is strict job protection for adult workers, because they make it difficult for young workers to experiment. There is no labor turnover, and you cannot feel secure that a job will come along later. And that's a feature of the Spanish labor market, for example. The Spanish labor market was not a good labor market for people to enter. The current government is trying to reform it, but reforms are taking place very slowly. A flexible labor market is better for the young people. I should say that the French labor market actually suffers from this problem as well. There isn't enough labor turnover. And therefore, if you want to help young people, then you should be supporting the abolition of strict job protection legislation. Dismissal and job separation should be much more frequent than we observe now in the European South in particular. Now, another poor policy is one that inhibits job creation, such as a common minimum wage for young people and adults. A minimum wage which is less for young people than it is for adults helps a lot, because then companies create lots of jobs and they give preference to young people so you can experiment. And countries who tried that successfully would include countries like the Netherlands, for example, has applied this policy very successfully. Britain has applied it very successfully. Then the administrative cost of job creation should be low, so that employers do not hesitate about starting new jobs. The cost of setting up companies should be low, so that young people can set up their own companies, and also older people can set up companies and recruit young people. There should be, as I mentioned, lower minimum wage for young people, and there should be flexible job creation conditions, and one-stop window for setting up companies, which has also been tried successfully in Germany, actually, following the Schroeder reforms of 2002-2005, when they simplified the job creation and the company setup conditions, and they have had a lot of success in creation of companies by young people. So this is the kind of structure of labor market that is most beneficial to young people.